Measures of central tendency. It's a grand sounding name for something that is actually quite straightforward and simple. And this section hopefully will be short and reasonably sweet as well. So when we say we want to calculate a measure of central tendency, it's nothing more than saying that if we have some data, we want to pick one value that is somehow representative of that data. And there's three common approaches that we can do, or we can use to do that. And you can see them listed here. The first one is the mean, or arithmetic mean. That's where we add all of the values up and then divide by the number of values that we have, and we get our arithmetic mean through that. The median, in contrast, is where we arrange all of the values from the smallest in order through to the largest, and we go to the middle value in our collection and we pick that value. And if it turns out we actually have an even number of values, so there's no one individual middle value, we pick the two values in the middle and we take their arithmetic average, add them up, divide them by 2. The mode is also another one where we go through, we look at the data and we say, well, what's the most commonly occurring value? What value do we see appearing most frequently? And we'll pick that then as our measure of central tendency. So there's three different ways that we can go about picking a value that we think will be representative of the data. I've got a small example you can see here where we have a table where we have a total of 8 users who have completed a particular task. And that task, we've measured the task completion time in terms of seconds. And we've calculated the mean, the median, and the mode of that data. And you can see them displayed graphically on the chart. And this simply highlights that these values can differ depending upon the data. So the mean, if we add them all up and divide them by the number, we arrive at a value of 24-ish. If we were to put them all in order and pick the one in the middle, we would get a value of 22. But you'll notice here there's 8 values, so there is no one natural middle value. So what we've done here is that the 2 that would fit in the middle will be 20 and 24, either side of it. And we've taken the average between those two to have a value of 22. For the mode, we've returned 18. If you look at the data, strictly speaking, there can be more than one modal value. If you look at this data, we have 2 18s from user 3 and user 7, but we also have 2 24s from user 6 and user 8. So strictly speaking, there are 2 modes. 18 and 24 are joint in terms of being the most commonly occurring or commonly frequently encountered value. So 3 different types. What type is most appropriate is actually an important thing to think about. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the median can be a more useful measurement. And part of the reason for that, it ties into outliers, particularly what you may define as an extreme positive outlier. So this is something which is a piece of data that is very far removed from the average value, the middle value, wherever you want to calculate it, and it's quite large. That is a value that will disproportionately up our mean value. It has a large impact upon the mean. And because we're collecting data here from users, potentially maybe we're doing it online, potentially maybe we're collecting the time of something. Maybe the user just let the task run on and never really bothered submitting the thing in and hit submit at the end, and we have a very large positive value that goes in. So where we think our data may contain some erroneous values, and that's always an important consideration, we should be careful then about using the mean. Sometimes it's good to calculate the mean and the median value and to see are they notably different, because that can give you a good indication if you do have those extreme outliers. And then it's a question of what you want to do with those outliers. When we're dealing with continuous data, so for example, task completion time where it's based on a stopwatch, so it could be 10.4 seconds or 10.9 seconds or 8.3, it's not really that meaningful then to try to identify a modal value, because there's too many values and it's just going to be random if 2 things have ended up more or less in the same point. So depending upon the data that you're looking at and how that data is distributed, you may not always want to use a modal value. If you're looking at sort of ordinal data, that type of one where you have a small number of samples, either it's good, excellent, okay, average, or poor, those types of things, then yes, asking or thinking about what is the modal value can be really very useful, because then it's the most typical one that the users selected, and that is a meaningful way of measuring it. So 3 different techniques. The box in the middle in green, you can see how in Excel you can calculate these. The first one, if you want to calculate the mean, is the average function in Excel. So when you average, by default, you take the mean and you simply put in a list of numbers or a list of cells containing numbers, and it'll do it automatically. You have the median function, which will calculate the middle value, again taking the average if it's an even number of values. And you have the mode, which will calculate the most commonly occurring value. In Excel, if you have more than one modal value, like the example we saw on the previous screen, it returns the smallest modal value. We'll not return all of them, we'll just return the smallest. So that's 3 tools. They're surprisingly useful. They do give us good ways of thinking about our data, and actually sometimes the differences between them also help us understand a bit more about the data as well. So that's all we want to explore in terms of our measures of central tendency. In the next section, we'll go on to something a little bit more significant and challenging mathematically, when we're thinking about measures of variability that we observe within the data.